folks. Sorry to interrupt. But thank you all for coming and welcome to this, the fourth of our 6 lunch and learn presentations, brought to you by the Western Institute of Lifelong Learning, for Lifelong Learning, in partnership with WNMU. Before I turn things over to our speaker, I know that our president, Frank Harrod, would like to make a few announcements.
Good afternoon. A couple of WILS programs that we're co-sponsoring. First of all, tomorrow night, 5:30, there's an artist reception, and at 6:30, the artist is speaking at Light Hall. Person is Tina Mian. I spoke about her last week. She's an artist out of Winslow, Arizona. She's the co-owner of the La Posada Hotel there, and she's remodeled that and fixed it up. I'm going to be talking about her art. That's tomorrow night, 5:30 reception, 6:30 the program, and you are definitely invited to the reception. Dr. Shepard is putting that on. Part of the university's effort at getting a good turnout for the speaking part of the program. So it's on the outside of Light Hall there. It's a great setting. It'll be good food. You can't beat it. Then the next night, Friday night, 7 o'clock, and in the GRC, we are in the GRC, in the other built room, the auditorium. We are co-sponsoring a program with the Audubon Society. Speaker is Gary Morgan. He's a state paleontologist who has dug up a number of big mammoth bones right here in the Gila. So it should be interesting to see what he has uncovered. Questions? Yes.
I just wanted to point out, when you passed out some of those early, there was a date that's wrong on it.
This one?
The cafeteria, lots of cafeterias. It was supposed to be Wednesday and now it's Thursday.
Yes.
So in case people were planning.
I go to the website for more information on all the programs I mentioned, as well as a couple others upcoming. If you go to our website, click on programs, you'll get everything. Anything else? Thank you.
All right. Well, before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to remind you that next week, the 5th of the 6 lunch and learn presentations for the fall, our speaker will be Bill Baldwin. I think many of you know him. You know that he's an excellent speaker, and he has a talent for making the most mundane or arcane or esoteric topic fascinating. He's going to be talking to us next time about Jenkins' ear and other catalytic events in history, whatever that means. But I can promise you that it's going to be spellbinding. And speaking of spellbinding, our speaker this afternoon is Linda Moore, and her biography reads as follows. While working as a biologist for the National Zoological Park in Washington, D.C., Linda discovered her fascination for raptors. She developed a raptor education program while working at the birdhouse there, training a red-tailed hawk for program use. That led to doing field work with raptors, which included working at several raptor banding stations on the East Coast. Her interest in rehabilitation of raptors soon followed. She led the release program for the Raptor Conservancy of Virginia. Since moving to New Mexico, she has discovered that birds other than raptors are worthy of consideration as more than just raptor food, which accounts for our otherwise enigmatic title to her remarks, Why Hawks, Pigeons, and Some Owls Don't Like Me. Linda Moore.
Thank you. y'all hear me okay? I'm gonna try to use this because my voice tends to be a little low and I'm afraid you guys in the back would be able to hear me. Thank you for coming in today because it's a gorgeous day outside and I'm just astonished that you guys would come inside to listen to me, but gee, thanks. I'm gonna not bore you with my entire life history, but I wanna give you just a little quick summary of it because that will help you probably get a little better perspective of how I got into doing this. As a kid, I really loved animals of all kinds. And so I would actually identify all the squirrels in my yard either by looks or by their behavior. I would go out and catch snakes, which my mother would then flush down the toilet. I'm so sorry, Julie. I didn't catch many after that. And to my mother's dismay, I basically surrounded myself with animals as much as possible. But then I grew up and I went to college and I majored in psychology and sociology because my interest is really in behavior. And then I got out of college and I had a job that I had 6 days a week and I got rid of a boyfriend. So I had an extra day. So I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do with that? So I decided to go volunteer at the zoo. And first I did interpretation programs for the zoo. And then later I became an animal keeper aide. And about 6 months after I started doing that, the zoo called me up one day and said, would you like a job? Let me think for a second. Yeah. So that started my career. I was there for 30 years as a biologist working directly with the animals. Great career, which I really loved. But I was doing a little stint at the birdhouse one time, and I noticed one of the keepers there catching pigeons. And I said, you know, Liz, why are you catching pigeons of all things? And she said, well, I know this guy who traps and bands raptors in the fall. And so every year I catch lures for him, which are the pigeons that he uses. I'm like, okay, so do you mind if I take him the pigeons? Because this sounds pretty fascinating to me. She said, no, that's fine. So that's how I met Roger Jones. And Roger, oops, there we go. I'll figure this out.
Wait, no,
Yes.
point it at the computer rather than at the screen.
Okay. Oh, good idea. Oh, that's better.
Oh, there's.
So Roger Jones basically ran a raptor trapping station out on Short Hill Mountain, Virginia, which is kind of where Pennsylvania, not Pennsylvania, but Virginia, Maryland, and West Virginia all come together. And it was basically on the same ridgeline that Hawk Mountain, Pennsylvania is on in Pennsylvania. And they, of course, get a great flight of raptors by that every year. So we were kind of on that same ridgeline and would expect to see quite a few of the same raptors that went by Hawk Mountain. This was a particular area that we had on the west side of the mountain. He had some also on the east side of the mountain. Basically what you would look for was a nice view up to the north and a nice open field so that the raptors could see you easily as they're coming by. And then, oops, I'm looking at the hang of this, I promise. And then we also had some places right up on top of the mountain, which would be a rock outcropping such as this. And you notice here you've got a lure pole, and here you've got a net, and there is a pigeon. And so basically the blind would be kind of over here where I'm standing, and you would have a line that runs from the blind all the way up to the lure pole, down to the pigeon, down to the net, and back to the blind again. And that meant that if you pulled on that line, you could actually pull that pigeon up into the air. So the pigeon would flap when you go up and he'd flap when you come down. And that was your lure for the raptors. That's what got their attention to where you were. I was also lucky enough to do a lot of trapping on the east coast of Virginia, right along the shoreline. This particular blind was in Cape May, New Jersey, and there you had basically the entire shoreline to work with. So it was a nice open area with a lot of good view from the north. So essentially, this is your typical raptor trapping blind. Oops. And I really good thing is, this is where basically your trapper would sit. So that is the person who would maneuver the lines and also be in charge of the traps. And then up here, you would have spotters who would basically tell you, oh, there's a hawk up to 2 o'clock, or there's a hawk at 10 o'clock, and they would get your attention to the area where there might be a bird coming in towards you. And then this was a typical bow net that you would use along the shoreline. The shoreline basically got very different birds from the ridge line because in general, the shoreline we get more of a variety of raptors than we did on the ridge. The birds along the shoreline are usually ones that are kind of hatchier birds, so they were just hatched that year. They're not good at migrating yet. They don't really know where they're going, but they know that they have to head south. And so when they hit the northwest winds, it pushes them towards the shoreline. And they get to where they If they go any further to the east, of course, it's going to be over the ocean. You don't want to do that. So they will kind of hang close to the shoreline at that point. So we would get a lot of the smaller birds along the shoreline, such as kestrels and sharpshins and things like that. Then we would see along the ridge. This is actually a small bownet here, and there's a starling here. And you want to protect those smaller lure birds quite well because you don't want the raptors really coming in on them. And don't be thinking that every time a raptor comes in, you're going to lose your bird, because that's not the idea. So you basically protect it pretty well with mist nets. Up on the ridgeline, we really didn't use mist nets that much because we had a lot of red-tailed hawks coming in, and they would come in at great speed, and they would actually go right through a mist net. So we generally just use the bow nets up there. So this would be your typical raptor trap or Fisherman's Island at Cape Charles, Virginia. So you would have a blind. This is where your trapper and your spotters would sit. This would be your main bow net, which would have a pigeon on it. This one would be an auxiliary that would usually have a starling on it. And then you'd have another lure over here, which might be a sparrow or another starling. And again, you'd have mist nets kind of surrounding the entire area. So you'd be sitting in the blind, you'd be looking this direction, kind of all around, waiting to see a bird, and then you try to lure it in. And of course, you need equipment if you're going to be banding raptors. So the other thing that's in the blind is an area for the birds to actually be processed in. We always would weigh them. We would obviously band them, and we would get whatever measurements that we wanted to get off them, such as the wing chord, which is what she's doing right there, or a measurement of the column or the hallux, which is the rear talus, whatever measurement you wanted to get. And then what you really need is a pigeon. Poor pigeons. Now you notice that this guy's kind of sitting out there, but if you also notice, whoops, can't notice that way, can you? He's got a little flak jacket on. And so just like falconers use gloves on their arms, we would put flak jackets on our pigeons. When I first started, and you make these cheap. When I first started working with the raptors up on the ridgeline, we were using a vest like this. So the wings of the bird would go through there, and then you kind of tuck it underneath his breast and hook your line to there. Well, as you can see, that leaves a whole lot of the bird exposed here, a whole lot of the bird exposed here, and a whole lot of the bird exposed down here. I've got kind of a soft heart for pigeons, even though I was doing this with pigeons. I really do like pigeons quite a bit. So if I was out using this vest, I was finding that I would often get a pigeon that would get hit like under the wing or back underneath here. And if I had a pigeon that got injured, I would take it home. And I would heal it up. And then I'd put it in a coop. And then I would never use it again. Because I would feel that wasn't fair to the pigeon. So when my coop started getting full, I had to come up with something else. So I actually developed a new vest, and this one gave a lot more protection. So essentially, the bird's breast goes into here, 2 legs go through here, 2 wings go through here, and you can see the wing holes are a little smaller than they were in the other one. And then it all wraps up nice around the body, and your line goes through this little ring here, and then there's a Velcro strip which holds it tight there. So you see that gave pigeons a lot more protection than the other vest did. So that worked quite well. I didn't take quite so many pigeons home that way, which was good. And of course, the idea is to get a hawk into the net. So basically, what you're doing is you're pulling on that line. You get a hawk's attention. If it's a red tail up on the ridge, it's pretty amazing because you can just see them kind of veer your way, and then they're just heading straight for you at this incredible speed. And then at the last moment, you see these legs come down. And a lot of times your spotter will go, legs, 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 and you know that they're coming in with intent because they're going to come grab the pigeon. The idea is that you're going to have the pigeon right up by the bow net when the hawk hits it. So as soon as that hawk contacts the pigeon, you can actually trip that bow net over both the hawk and the pigeon. Then this is usually what happens. The pigeon goes on one end, the hawk goes on the other end, which is good for the pigeon. And then you have to go out and remove the hawk from the net because usually the hawks are kind of bouncing around trying to get out, obviously. So you want to get the hawk out of the net before he actually escapes. So you go out and carefully remove them from the net, and then you end up with this. Now, obviously, this is not a hawk that's very happy.
Can you
Enjoy.
do that barehanded?
Yes, we actually do barehanded.
Wow.
I always felt when I was handling a raptor that I had better control over them if I was barehanding them than if I had gloves on. So usually we would do barehanded. Some birds are bitier than others, but we'd always go for the feet first no matter what because they are raptors. So yeah, we've got a hold of the feet here, and this guy is obviously a little upset. He's probably thinking that he's not going to make it past dinner or whatever. And we don't really want to keep him in this condition for very long. So what we do is put him in a can. Red-tailed hawks go in coffee cans. A large red-tailed hawk would go in a can this size. You can imagine it's a pretty good sized bird. A regular red-tailed hawk, which is that one, would go into this size can. And cans, have y'all noticed cans are getting really hard to find? I mean, these things are like gold to banders now because they're making cans now that are either made of cardboard or they're made of plastic, exactly. And so it's getting harder and harder to find appropriate material to do bird banding with. So those are cans for red tails. You also have cans for Cooper's hawks. This would be a female Cooper's hawk. This would be a male Cooper's hawk. And you could have lunch in the blind, have a little snack of Pringles, and then use it for a sharpshin hawk afterwards. The idea behind the can, this is a hatchery red tail in that can. The idea behind the can is that as soon as you put the bird into the can, it's been shown that their heart rate will drop by about 30%. So instead of having that bird that's totally freaking out, you've got a bird that's calming down in the can. It also holds them nice and snug so that they can't struggle. And it also makes it so that they can't see very well, so they don't have a lot of that stimulus coming at them. So all that means that you can leave them in the can and get them processed that way. First thing you want to do is put a band on their leg. So each bird gets their individual band, and you can actually just leave them in the can, pull the foot out, and put the band on that way. We also want to weigh them. And then once you get that done, you can take them out of the can. You can use just a regular ruler for a wing cord. That will measure the length of the wing. Again, any other measurements you want, you can take then. And then you're ready to release them. Oh, we check the crop too. Some birds come out actually with a full crop, so that can affect their weight. So you always want to check to make sure they don't have anything in their crop. And then you release them. And typically I would just kind of set the birds outside the blind because I didn't want to throw them up in the air or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of get their senses around them first and then let them go off on their own. And this is very typical for as soon as you put the hawk down, you turn around and look at you like, so it's not a good look, is it? Yeah. Yeah, not a happy bird. So this is happening in the fall of the year on migration, and what you're looking for is cold fronts. And when you see a cold front like this come through, you realize that you probably have a good chance of getting a lot of birds. So basically, I would watch the weather during the fall, and if I knew that there was going to be weather like this coming, I'd call in sick at work. Because I want to be out there on the ridgeline or on the shore. There's some birds that basically precede weather fronts like this. Other birds come after weather fronts like this. But the ones that precede them are peregrine falcons. And when you see a cold front coming through like that, especially this time of year, early in October, you want to be out there in your blind because a lot of times you have a chance of catching a peregrine. And these are just incredibly gorgeous birds. This is one that I caught at Cape May. This is a hatchier female. And when peregrines come into your station, it really takes a little bit of skill to catch them because they are birds that like to hunt like this, and they're swooping down and around, and what they want to do is they want to grab that pigeon and go off with it. So you have to, as they're swooping around like that, you kind of have to serve the pigeon up to them, and then if they grab it, you have to pull them in very quickly so that you can get that bow net around them. Worked really well with this particular bird. Isn't that a gorgeous bird? Didn't work so well with this one. This was when I was kind of a new apprentice, and this is probably my first peregrine. And this bird had come in to me on the ridge. We don't see many peregrines on the ridge anyway. And so he was doing the stooping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I finally got him to take the pigeon, and as he came down, I tripped the net, and the bird was on the outside of the net. Not a good thing. So here he has my pigeon. He has a foot on the ground. He's holding on tight. Has my pigeon with the other foot. And I'm trying to pull him in because sometimes you can pull him back in under the net. but it didn't work, and it didn't work, and it didn't work. So finally, he reached out and he started plucking my pigeon. And I'm like, no, in complete frustration. I smacked the front of the blind as hard as I could. The plexiglass on the window broke. The peregrine jumped up in the air. I had another bow over here with another pigeon, so I immediately hit that pigeon. The peregrine saw that, went right to that, and a trap. Not a good trap, but at least I got him. And the pigeon was okay. Even better. And on the shoreline, we didn't see too many merlins along the ridgeline, but on the shoreline, we certainly would. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we would always joke that it was merlin time. And you had to be in your blind at 4 o'clock because these guys really like to fly in the late afternoon for whatever reason. And merlins are super little aggressive birds. They, again, would be doing that falcon back and forth, back and forth. And we would often catch these in mist nets. So you could be out removing a merlin from a mist net, and you'd hear the trapper behind you yell, "Got one over here too." So you could often get more than one merlin at a time if it was a good flight day. Again, beautiful little birds. And here you can actually see that falcon notch on the beak, and notice the dark eye and the long pointed wing, all very typical of falcons. Merlins are knuckle biters, and so are kestrels. And so when you're working with falcons, again, if you're not wearing gloves, you're going to end up with some bloody knuckles. Now, kestrels are a bird that we generally would not see, well, we'd see them out along the shoreline and up in the ridge, but it was very rare for us to actually catch them in a station because you'd see them kind of flying around and you'd be using the appropriate lure for them. And then all of a sudden they'd come down and grab a grasshopper and go up on top of your lure pole and eat it. That was very typical for kestrels. But there is a good way to catch kestrels, and they actually take to nest boxes very readily. I live out in Cliff. In the past few years, I put up a kestrel nest box. In the past 2 years, I've had successful clutches of 5 kestrels each year, which is a lot of kestrels. So nest boxes work really well, both in the east and in the west, apparently. If you're going to ban kestrels and you're going to ban chicks, basically what you want to do is remove the chicks from the box, and then you can ban them. Now notice the difference between this chick here and this chick here. There's a huge size difference. That's because when a kestrel female first lays an egg, she starts sitting on it right away. So in the case of a clutch where she has 5 young, there's at least a 5-day gap between the oldest chick and the youngest chick, and probably more like a 7-day gap. So this guy here is probably a couple weeks old. This guy here is only about a week old. Now we could ban all of these, except probably that one. That one's legs are probably still so small that the band would just slip off.
Linda,
Yes,
do they outgrow their band?
they do not.
They do not.
They do not, because we know what size kestrels take. They take a size 3B band.
Oh, 3B.
3B, that's right. And so you know if you're putting a 3B band on, you're putting the appropriate band on. That's not true for all birds, but certainly for kestrels it is.
It's kind of like my shoes.
Yeah.
And then this is a little older kestrel, and feisty. Just about ready to fledge. You can see he's got his new band on, his new jewelry on. But he's all ready to basically get out of the nest box and go. Gyrfalcons. This particular bird was the first gyrfalcon ever seen in Virginia. And it was shot by someone, and she ended up with a bad wing that you can see there. She lived her life at the Wildlife Center of Virginia as an education bird. And there's only one other gyrfalcon that's ever been recorded in Virginia. Come on in. It was actually in 1991 when that happened. Again, I was kind of I had good luck as a new bander, which is probably why I got my sub for bidding in the first place. But it was a day late in November, so it was late in the season. It was cloudy and there was very little wind. And it was a little bit out of the northeast. So I was out with my with Roger Jones, my master bander, and he was down on the east side where he knew all the birds would be. And he stuck me up on top of the ridge where he didn't think there would be any birds that day. It's okay. So it was a very quiet day. He was catching some birds down there, sure enough, and he had a spotter with him by the name of Barkley, and I had a spotter with me by the name of Chris. And all of a sudden, Chris, I had three traps that I could work with. So I had one kind of on the east, one right in the middle, and one a little bit over on the west. And so I was using mostly the one over on the east side because we had east wind. And suddenly Chris, my spotter, said there's a bird in the notch, which is kind of over on the west side. So I kind of glanced up, saw the bird moving fast, reached over and started luring with the other bow on the left side. And the bird was almost past it by that point, but turned around, came down, sat right next to the pigeon, about 2 feet away from it. So I sent the pigeon into the bow, and the bird jumped to it. And I let out a whoop when I left the blind because I thought it was a hatch or goshawk. So I went out, picked the bird up out of the net, and then I looked at that falcon beak and that dark eye and that pointed wing, and I'm like, well, this is a falcon. But it's way larger than any peregrine I've ever seen. So I knew I had a deer falcon in my hands. So I went back in the blind and I radioed Roger. Barkley answered on the radio, and I said, can you have Roger come up here and look at a bird for me? And Barkley said, sure, but Roger wants to know what it is. And I said, well, I think it's a deer falcon. And Barkley said, can I come too? I said, sure. So they came up, and to this day, I can remember Roger's face when I pulled that bird out of the can, and he saw that sure enough, it was a deer falcon. Accipiters, they're great little birds to catch. We catch a lot of them both on the ridge and along the shoreline. These are both hatchier birds. I did it again. Still doing it. Here we go. This is a hatchier male Cooper's hawk, and this is a hatchier female sharpshin. And a lot of times people have trouble identifying them. It's kind of easy when you got them in the hand, quite frankly. But on a distance, one of the things that you can look for is this nice kind of rounded tail that a Cooper's hawk has, whereas the sharpshin hawk has more of a flat, squared off tail. And then look at their eye. The sharpshin's eye basically takes up that entire head and has a very small head in comparison to that of the Cooper's hawk. And the eye on the Cooper's hawk is much smaller in size in relation to the rest of its head. And the look on the sharpshin's face is of terror because the Cooper's hawk is looking at it like that. Also not a good look. But I was saying that sometimes you can get birds with full crops, and this is an example of that. That bird has just eaten something very large, but still was aggressive enough to come in and actually, come in and try to get another meal on top of whatever it was that he ate. But again, you can see the difference between the head on these. This is the Cooper's hawk. This is the sharpshin hawk. And they both have their new jewelry on. And this is what they look like as an adult, which are absolutely gorgeous birds, look completely different from that of the hatchier birds. The hatchier, again, are very brown with the brown streaks, whereas the adult has this nice dark cap, dark red eye, nice gray feathering all along the back and the wings, and then this gorgeous kind of orange mottling on the breast. And Cooper's hawks tend to be, the population tends to be increasing from what we know as far as banding is concerned. Sharpshin hawk population seems to be going down, whereas the Cooper's hawk population is coming up. And I was actually on Fisherman's Island one day when we had a record number of Cooper's hawks that came in. We banded 34 Cooper's hawks in one day at one station. They were everywhere that day. It was a very, very busy day. And then there's the ultimate of the accipiters, which is the goshawk. Now, goshawks we would see very rarely out on the shoreline and also on the ridge. So it was always quite a treat to get a goshawk coming in. And the way I remember specifically a couple times when I had goshawks come into me, I'd be looking at the north because that's where all of your birds basically come from. And you'd see a speck and you'd watch it get bigger and you'd identify it as it got bigger. Well, I'd be sitting there looking out north and all of a sudden I see something out of the corner of my eye coming at me through the woods. And you can see this goshawk just all the way through the trees, and then you come get your pigeon. Amazing flyers. This is a hatchier goshawk, and again, typical hatchier brown. And then look at that eye. That will be dark red when that bird gets old. And this is a second-year goshawk, and you can tell that because it's got some adult feathers coming in. You can see the gray feathers coming in here, there, and along the tail, and the head has certainly changed. And if you notice something else that's different about them, is their mouth is wide open. Oops. And that's because they're screaming at the top of their lungs. And goshawks did that a lot. Basically, when you catch a goshawk, they pretty much scream even inside the can, they're yelling. So you try to get them processed as quickly as possible because they are making such a racket. And for example, when I caught this bird, I was the most northern person on the mountain that day. So I radioed back and said, hey, I got a goshawk. In the background, you could hear, So everybody's like, yeah, we can tell. So I let the bird go, and a couple minutes later, next guy down the ridge, Linda, I got your goshawk. And so there was 2 other people that caught the same goshawk all the way down the ridge. Northern harriers, they're beautiful birds. This is how you normally see them, floating very gently over all the fields. And what they're doing is they're listening for their prey. So they do this nice, beautiful, easy flight over the fields. They typically don't fly very high. When you have them in hand, you can actually see that disc face that they have. It's very similar to that of an owl. And basically what it does is it accumulates all those sound waves right up towards their ears. So they've got great eyesight, but they also have excellent hearing as well. And they can hear little rustlings in the grass over which they're flying. The other thing about harriers is they're all feathers. I mean, she's got the bird up by basically his thighs, but you can see how long his legs are. But these feathers are just incredibly long, and you have to be very careful when you're handling harriers because you can actually bend their feathers pretty easily. But the ultimate of harriers is the gray ghost, or the adult male harrier. Beautiful birds. And then if you're trapping and banding birds, of course, golden eagles are something that everybody wants to get. We do have very few golden eagles in the east compared to here in the west. This was, typically we'd catch maybe 1 a year, and this was my lucky year to catch this bird. It didn't have a can big enough to put it in. So fortunately, I had somebody else with me that day who could help me process it. And you can see here, I'm holding it. You might think I'm really stupid for holding it that way. The golden eagles tend to be very docile when you actually are holding them. They tend to give up very easily, and so they're just kind of sitting there very quietly. If this was a bald eagle, I would never hold an eagle that way because I probably would have lost half of my face. But when the guy took this picture, I said, look, the back of his head matches my hair. And the other bander was working and said, yeah, more, but his didn't come out of a bottle. Actually, I think these days, I'm going for that look. The great ghost look. I think we all are, that's right. Yeah, I'm okay with that. The golden eagles are just massive birds. This is Randy, one of the other banders I worked with. And you can see that eagle's foot is basically the same size as his hand, just huge. And their talons are just incredibly gigantic. And he is bleeding a little bit right there, you notice that. But considering the size of that bird and the strength of them, that's a pretty minor one. And red-shouldered hawks, we don't have them out here, I kind of miss them. But they seem to be becoming more and more numerous in the east. Their population really seems to be coming up. They adapt very readily to urban areas. So they're doing quite well along the east coast. This is a young hatchier bird. And it was kind of unusual for us to get them in raptor banding stations. We just, I think, didn't have the appropriate lure for them. But they were relatively easy to catch during road trapping events. So what you would do is this is a nice adult red shoulder. You would look for a bird sitting like this close to the side of the road, and then you would take out your, there's still 2 mice in it, I love it.
Oh no.
You take out your balustrade tree, or what we call a BC. Joan's gonna turn on the light so you can actually see the mice. So this is a trap that we would use when we were road trapping. So during the winter time, when the birds are actually sitting very close to the road, usually it was a good time to do this type of trapping. You always want to put 2 mice in the BC because it makes them move around more. But this basically has a basket on it, and then it's got these loops on top. So the idea is that if you see a bird like this sitting on the side of the road, you put this trap out, the mice moving around gets its attention, excuse me, and the bird would come up and kind of dance on the top, trying to get to the mice. And if you were fortunate, they would get caught in these loops. So once you saw a bird kind of pull away and see the trap move, you would know that you got it. Now I just got caught. And then you would, I really am caught. And then you'd run out and grab the bird from the trap. And you always had to make sure that you had the appropriate size trap out for the bird that you were going for. For example, if you put this out for a red-tailed hawk, they could carry it away without any problem. So you always made sure that the appropriate trap was out for whichever type of bird you were going for. Red-shouldered hawks would kind of readily to this. Red-tailed hawks would come to a BC. Kestrels is another good way to catch a kestrel. Thank you, Julie. And red-tailed hawks, I really enjoy all raptors, but red-tailed hawks have to be one of my favorites. And the reason being probably because I've handled so many of them in my time, but also because of the variety that they have. They have all these different hunting methods. They have different sizes. They have different plumages. Out here, you have even more plumages with those dark red tails that you get. There was one out on 180 the other day that I just pulled over and stared at because it was just such a magnificent looking bird. So I really enjoy the red-tailed hawks. This one's just about to get trapped. And in particular, I like the little males. This guy is an older male, probably an older male. Red-tailed hawks, there's a lot of overlap between the sexes, so you can't positively sex them when you're in the field. But if you have a bird that's about 700 grams, that's pretty small. So you know you probably have a male. And if you have a bird that's 1,800 grams, it's huge. So you know you probably have a female. So the females are much larger in size. But that nice dark brown eye, and just love them. So why are we doing all this? Why am I torturing these birds, right? Well, the idea is to try to get more information about them. So each bird that comes in gets a band. These are bands that would go along this sharp-shin male. You can probably see how small that is. And this would be a band on the size of an eagle. You can see how big that is.
Yeah.
So each band has an individual number. When you band a bird, that information goes to the bird banding laboratory, which is maintained in Laurel, Maryland at the Texas National Wildlife Research Center. And if you catch a bird that somebody else has banded, which is the case with this one, they'll send you the certificate once you turn it in. So I caught this bird, which was a red-tailed hawk with band number 185700556. I caught him on the 6th of November 2007 at Short Hill Mountain. And so I sent that information to the lab, and they sent me back the certificate. And then I have the bander's name, so I can contact him if I want more information. But I know that the bird was hatched in 2007, so it was a hatch-year bird. And he had banded it in New York, which is in upper state New York, Braddock Bay, on September the 3rd, 2007. So in 2 months' time, that bird had done the southern migration from New York all the way down to Virginia. Some birds go really, really fast. Others go really slow. This is probably a little bit on the slow side. But that's why we do this, so that we can get more information about migration patterns. Of course, today, a lot of times you can put transmitters on birds. Back then, it was something that was really, really expensive. But it's still not a cheap way to do it. So as we speak today, unless it's raining, it might be raining, Cape May is probably out there banding birds still. And then you can also get more information about the species itself. This particular bird was a red-tailed hawk that a fellow bander caught up on Short Hill Mountain. It was 18 years old when he caught it. And he knew that because it had been banded as a hatch-year bird the first year that it was hatched by a guy by the name of Lynn Susi, who runs a raptor rehabilitation center in New Jersey. So when fellow bander Bob caught this bird, he sent that information to Lynn, and everybody's like, wow, that's really an old bird. So sometimes they do quite well out in the wild. In this particular, I also was interested in rehabilitation of raptors. So this particular bird, when I caught it, it was a second-year red tail, and I realized when I weighed it that its weight was really seemed quite down. So I took it out of the can, did an examination on him, and he had a big hole right there. He had eaten something that had perforated his crop, and so everything that he was eating basically was coming out the front. So he was in rather rough shape, so I put him in a box, took him to a veterinarian that we work with, who does a lot of raptor stuff. And he stitched him up and put him on antibiotics for a week, fed him up for another week, and then released him back on the ridge. So the rehabilitation aspect of what I was doing, I basically would kind of evaluate birds for release and then get them out again. And I always banded all the birds that I released because I, again, wanted to learn more about them. So this is a barred owl, had a blind eye there. And so basically what I would do is watch it fly. I would make sure it would come up to the perch appropriately, make sure it would come down on mice appropriately. And for owls, that usually wasn't much of a problem if they lost an eye because they're so keen on their hearing. They use their hearing much more than their eyesight. It could be a little bit different with a hawk because they're much more visual than owls are. So if you have a hawk that's blind in one eye, it may or may not be able to be released again. There was actually a really famous one. Anybody ever heard of Pale Male? Who was the red tail that kind of took up residence in Central Park, built a beautiful nest over top of a really expensive apartment building, and had a mate. And the mate had a band on. And so some real observant people managed to get a scope on the band and read the band number. It turned out that bird had been banded by Lynn Susie, again, the guy in New Jersey, and it was blind in one eye. So that bird was doing fine out there, one eye. And this little screech owl was one that came in injured, healed up okay, but then he was just busting himself up in the cage that we had him, and he just kept flying into the sides of it and breaking all his feathers. So I finally took him home and put him in my sunroom, which was a pretty good sized room. And he lived there for probably about 6 months while he grew his feathers out again, and he did get released again. So sometimes you just try to do various things for birds to try to get them back out. And so this is a bird that I had fed in the morning and then banded it, put it in the box, and now I'm going to release it. Of course, she's looking at me like, what's going on now? But then the next thing, of course, is that she gets released. And typically they will kind of come back and take a look at you. They'll go to a nearby perch. They look back at you, and I think they're looking at me and they're going, thank you, give me a second chance in life. That's not at all true. That's probably actually a look of, I never want to see you again, and I hate you. And you know, that's okay with me. That's the way I want it to be. And this is my most famous, or to me, my most infamous capture. Did you all remember when there was a Cooper's hawk flying around the Library of Congress? A number of years ago, I guess it was 2011 now. I had recently retired from the zoo, and a friend of mine who worked at the Library of Congress called me up one day, and she said, hey, we've got this Cooper's hawk flying around the dome. Can you come get it? And I'm like, sure, no problem. It's dumb. Never said that. So the next day I went with all my, my mice, my pigeons. We go through security. I have an escort. We go up to where the door is to the dome, and nobody had a key. Nobody had the key to get up to the dome. They had no idea how long it had been since anybody had been in the dome. So they finally had to get hold of the architect of the Capitol. I can imagine the size of the key ring that guy has. And he managed to find the key and brought it over to us so we could get in. And the dome was this long climb up these little narrow stairs that were really dark. It was January, so it was really cold. And it was pretty dark up there. So I got up there. There was about a 3-foot section, wide section, all the way around the dome. And that had all the metal braces in it for the dome. And then there was a wall about yay high, and you could kind of look over that wall and look straight down into the reading room way below. Of course, the dome was beautiful up above you. And here's this Cooper's hawk flying around in there. So the only thing that I had to work with was a ledge about yay wide, which went all the way around the edge of the dome. So I had to make sure that my traps wouldn't fall down onto somebody in the reading room. And when I first saw the Cooper's hawk, she had a huge crop, so I knew that she had just eaten before she came in. We kind of figured that she had chased a pigeon or some other bird in through a vent, and then instead of going back out the same way that she came in, she went back into the Library of Congress and couldn't find her way out again. So day one, she was not interested. I left. Day 2, she was not interested. I left. Day 3, she was not interested. I left. Getting a little worried because by this time it was national news that there was a bird flying around the cuckoo clock in the Library of Congress. Day 4, she was still not showing any interest in what I had. So we were thinking, well, maybe the people down below are bothering her. So we had somebody stay actually that whole night, and they tried to catch her with no luck. And then day 5, I put out a plea. I need starlings because I knew that I didn't have the appropriate lure bird for her. And my hero, Kenton, emailed me back and said, I have 2 starlings that I've kept for road trapping this year. So the next day he brought frickin' frack. And the frickin' frack went through security along with us. And then we put them out along that little tiny ridge line. Within 15 minutes, we had her. Thank goodness. I had visions of this hawk just flopping dead down on somebody on the reading room far below, and that being national news. Should not have been good. So she actually spent a couple weeks in rehab. There was nothing wrong with her except for the fact that she was down in condition. Brought her condition back up, and then I took her way far away from Washington, D.C. to release her. And then there are the birds that like me. I think they liked me. This was my first education red tail that I used. His name was Bullet. He'd been shot in Virginia. People shoot birds a lot in Virginia. And he was blind in one eye and was not a candidate for release. So he taught me so much about working with raptors because he'd never been worked with before, and I'd never worked with a raptor before. So it was a situation where he was usually pretty gentle with me, but every once in a while he got me pretty good. This was another red tail that I worked with. Her name was Kija. And she was a bird that I picked up because she had a broken wing in somebody's backyard. And we were hoping that she would be able to be rehabilitated. But apparently her parents had fed her on the ground for a number of, probably a week or better before we picked her up. So the wing was actually kind of frozen in place at that point and healed up. So I kept her for an education bird. When I picked her up, the keeper who'd been working with her said, "You're nuts. This bird's crazy." But she actually turned out to be a great bird. And I worked with her for many, many years. And then this is a Harris hawk that I worked with. This bird was actually imprinted for some reason. I don't know why, because you don't generally want to imprint these birds. So she actually thought she was a human being rather than a hawk. And whenever the falconers that were working with her would drop her weight, she would kind of know who was dropping her weight. And so when they released her to go fly after prey, she would go after the falconer instead. So she went through 4 falconers within 3 years' time. And when I went to go see her, because somebody told me that she would make a good education bird, I was like, okay, let's see. The falconer was holding her like this. That's a sure indication that there's something wrong, because the bird's basically out here and he's holding her so far away from him. So I asked him if I could hold her, and he's like, if you're really, really careful. So sure enough, as soon as I held her, she was trying to bite me and foot me and everything else. So she acted that way with me for quite a while afterwards, several weeks actually, and I kind of got tired of it. So I started thinking, well, you know, Harris hawks are very social hawks. So perhaps I'm going about this all wrong, you know, because I was kind of leaving her on a perch and letting her calm down. So I just started spending more and more time with her, thinking that, you know, since she thought she was a human, maybe she'd kind of like me too. And I knew I was making progress with her one day when I had her on the back of my chair and felt her preening my hair. And after that, we were good buddies. She always hated my husband. She always hated his dog. She liked my dog. She hated my husband's dog. And so I always had to be really careful, because she actually would attack both of them with every chance that she got. And I think I have one more slide, which is of my wedding day. But that's another story. Thank you all so much. Any questions? Any questions? Yes.
I don't have a question, but I want to say that we were blessed to see up close and personal a big golden hawk.
Golden eagle?
Golden eagle, excuse me. Unfortunately for the eagle, it had hit some power lines in our neighborhood, and it had fallen. So we called the wildlife folks, and a gentleman came out, officer came out, and was happy to get it because he was going to use it for education purposes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I just thought that was, it was so amazing to see how big they are.
They are huge birds, they really are. Yeah. Yeah, and I know when I was doing I actually learned more from my banding with rehab birds than I did from my banding of the birds out on the ridge lines and on the shoreline. There's probably only about a 2% return or 3% return on the bands that we do, although it's by far the easiest way to try to learn more information about birds because it's cheap and readily available for those of us who are banders. But banding the birds that in a rehab situation, I learned quite a bit about. For example, I had one bird that I banded and fed him in the morning, banded him, boxed him up, took him out to the ridge because this was in the fall of the year and this was a red-tailed hawk that I was releasing. And let him loose, and within an hour he was at one of the trapping stations and had been trapped. So I knew that immediately he had gone out and started hunting again, which is great news. And then I always was concerned about some of the young birds that we would raise up from small chicks because, they didn't have their parents to teach them what to hunt, especially for Cooper's hawks because we didn't really have the appropriate prey for them to feed on. So I was gratified one time when I banded a Cooper's hawk that had come in as a downy chick. And a year later, unfortunately, I got a return on it, but it was a good thing because I learned about it. It had lived for a year and then got hit by a car. So I knew that for a year, it had done just fine. So it did figure it out on its own. Yes.
Yes, Linda, what are some of the considerations for the site you choose to release?
Basically, I would always choose along either a migration site or I would, I would choose along such as a river because that is kind of your typical place where hawks and whatnot can migrate or can move through, especially in the Washington, D.C. area because it was so congested. So I would kind of take them out far away. Here it would be perfect because you've got so much area that you can release birds in. Fabulous, but there it was a little more constrictive. So basically either a migration site or some type of migratory area where they could move through safely.
Is that your best man?
That's my best man. He's Norman. Isn't he great? He's a fabulous animal. Other questions?
Linda,
Yes,
you made a protective vest for the pigeons. Did you do the same for the starlings?
I did. Yeah, I actually have one here.
Oh
You
my
can ask that
gosh.
question. Little teeny It's not quite as good.
Wow.
And starlings, of course, are a little more, if a red-tailed hawk gets them, that can be bad. But starlings are hard to catch. So we wanted to make sure that we kept them as healthy as possible. And you were only as good as the lure birds that you had. So yeah, we made little protective vests for them. And that pigeon that caught that eagle, it was fine. No problem. So we had many pigeons. We basically would rotate our pigeons in and out. And we kept track of how many hawks they would catch. We had a lot of pigeons that would catch over 10 birds. No problem, not any injuries.
I love the way you say the pigeon caught the hawk.
What kind of they did. There's some people who consider using it as bait, but I prefer the word lure. Yes, ma'am.
I had an experience one evening. There were a lot of jays that were eating. I put food out on the ground for the quail and so on, and there were probably 20 jays in there, and this hawk came in, and it was right at dusk, and he was trying his best to catch those jays, and they knew they were too fast, I think, because whatever he did, they would just wait, and then when he made his move, they would all take a back, and he kept that up literally for half an hour.
Wow, I bet they were squawking too, weren't they? Were they making a lot of noise, or were they not? No, really?
They were so,
That day
they were so impressed with themselves, and they were right.
Excuse me.
The poor hawk, I think, went to bed.
They are
without
jays
any
after
food.
all.
But what I could see, because it was kind of dark, was that he had
Your
two
glasses
white,
are too far away.
like rows of dots down his back.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought it must be either a sharpshin or a Cooper. He was
Probably,
kinda
probably
little,
hatch your
so-
bird. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, maybe it's just this year's bird and this is practice night.
And I'm sure you're absolutely right on that. Because
Because
they
he
do have
would,
to practice.
he would actually think, you could see he would try one strategy. He'd sit up here, and then he'd try another strategy. He'd sit right by the food and not move until he came back, and then he'd try again. He had like 10 different things that he tried and none of them ever worked.
Wasn't that fascinating to watch?
Oh, it was
And that's what we would see out in the field too. You'd see these red tails that some of them come straight in at you at just this incredible speed. And you see those legs come down. And others would suddenly just go from right behind you, and others would come in from the side. And some would kind of crab in, like, I don't see you, I don't see you, I don't see you. Boom. So it's just amazing the strategies that these hawks use.
Linda,
Yes.
what's the thinking on the general pattern in raptors in which females are larger than males?
You know, there's a lot of theories about it, but nothing really has been proven ever. My personal favorite is that the females are usually the ones that are on the nest. So their larger size gives them the ability to protect the nest. And then the male, being a little more smaller, a little more flexible, is probably a little better at getting different kinds of prey, so he can feed himself as well as her. And then once the chicks hatch and are old enough, then the female with her larger size can actually catch larger prey. And so then she can actually help feed the chicks at the nest as well. That's just my theory.
Are there any obvious exceptions to that, where males are larger than females?
In the raptors?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. There's some that are the same size, essentially, such as kestrels. But, yeah, no. Golden eagles, that one that I was holding was a male.
I'm hungry.
So a female would be even more of a handful.
Any more questions?
Any
then?
questions? Thank you all for sharing your lunch with me today.
Ow.